Hello, everybody. You're about to experience my interview with Brandon Bobart from Wholesale Gorilla. Brandon is the CMO of Wholesale Gorilla. We have a fantastic conversation about dealing with the challenges of marketing a platform like Wholesale Gorilla on the Shopify marketplace and how you deal with those challenges, how you establish a brand outside of the Shopify app marketplace, and how you position yourself as a leader in a space that is increasingly crowded. Hopefully, you'll learn a ton from this conversation. I know I did. Enjoy. Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. I have got another cracker lined up for you today. I would love to welcome Brandon Bobart from Wholesale Gorilla to the pod. Welcome, Brandon.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me today, brother. I look forward to our conversation.
Mate, this is so exciting. Look, since I started the sub-series around B2B, I've had some amazing conversations with B2B commerce experts from across the spectrum. Some platform vendors, some agencies, some consultants, running pretty much the full gamut, even industry experts running industry orgs around B2B. B2B seems to be getting the love in the e-commerce space like never before, particularly over the last 12 months or so. Are you experiencing the same thing?
Yeah, definitely in my role as a CMO for a variety of e-com companies, B2B has always been off to the side, right? It's always been done old school, line sheets, this kind of old school methodology that you've seen carried over. And I think in the last several years, you're starting to see that change. And then I think COVID, like many things, put it through a kind of a vacuum in time. And so you're definitely seeing more interest, more traditional business models move the e-commerce route. And then once they get into the e-com route, they start seeing all these other pieces to the puzzle and ways to grow through new acquisition channels, etc. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting journey, and it's a fun to be a part of.
Yeah, and look, you allude to something really clear about your history, which is that you haven't always worked specifically or solely in digital, but you come from a very strong marketing background. So CMO background, you're CMO and partner at Wholesale Gorilla now. But how did you come to be in the marketing space to begin with? What drew you to the marketing space? And then latterly, as you've leaned more towards digital marketing leadership for direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands, how did you make that transition, or what did you see some writing on the wall across the traditional marketing space that you said, hey, actually, this digital thing looks like it's going to be something, so I really need to be here?
Yeah, great question. I think my journey with marketing starts about a decade ago. I just fell in love with the relationships and the storytelling. And at that time, microbreweries were hot. So I just started cutting my teeth freelancing. I did photography. I tried to run ads. I created written content. And I realized that, frankly, a lot of those things I was okay at, but there was other people that were better. And so I kept progressing through different roles. And eventually I landed at a e-com brick and mortar hybrid startup. They were scaling. They started franchising their model. So I helped them franchise their model. We grew it to 15 stores. And it was at that point I really fell in love with almost like the sales side of marketing, and the relationships really continued to evolve. And I took that experience, and then about 4 years ago, started this company, Pisca Peaks Ventures. So it was taking a decade of experience working at small businesses, scaling small businesses, working at agencies, worked for a couple Charleston, South Carolina based agencies, and just trying to build something that I thought I didn't see in the agency space, which was a team that could help manage all of the different pieces. And that's what we've tried to build through our company, Pisca Peaks Ventures. Wholesale Gorilla is one of our awesome clients. We've been working with them for about 6 or 7 months. And when we came in, they had, to that point, really not had to do a bunch of traditional marketing. They were in the Shopify app ecosystem. They were scaling as Shopify was scaling. And then they started to see competition, and then they started to realize that, hey, there's some things that we need to reassess from the brand and acquisition strategies. And so that's when they brought our team in to help with those components. And digital to me is how you can reach people. It's how you and I know each other, right? It's like we know each other from this LinkedIn world, and it opens up so many doors and gives you a window into the devices of hundreds of billions of people. So it just seemed like combining all that experience with digital just made sense.
And how are you seeing marketing for B2B brands, not necessarily B2B SaaS, which we'll get into the details of Wholesale Gorilla in a minute, but more broadly speaking, I'm seeing a shift in even B2B retail brands that are selling products either to resellers or they're selling to a B2B, they're selling to other businesses as end consumers of their products. And historically, most B2Bs, they didn't even have a marketing function in the business. Lots of them never had they had a sales function and they had sales teams. They maybe had BDMs, AEs. They had lots of roles that were direct sales related roles, but they oftentimes had zero marketing function in the business at all, or it played second fiddle to sales. Like marketing was 100% in service of sales. Sales dictated what marketing did. They dictated what happened in terms of messaging. They dictated everything that marketing was effectively a slave to sales in the B2B world up until recently. And I'm seeing over the last couple of years, in particular during COVID, that a lot of B2B retail brands, they have come to the realization, oh my God, we do not have marketing capability. Marketing is what actually should be driving demand in our business so that a really solid sales team can close deals. And so therefore, there is this recognition we have to get our shit together from a marketing perspective. And that realization is spreading pretty fast in the industry. And I think this is probably, apart from e-commerce, this is probably one of the most transformative periods for B2B businesses that I've ever seen.
Yeah, and they're realizing that the ways of creating demand are just so different than when many of them cut their teeth in the industry. It was that old school traditional model, networking, trade shows, over the phone, pounding, calling, forcing their way into doors. And I think they realize that it requires a lot of heavy lifting. It's not as efficient as it used to be. I think people are more tuned out to that form of it. So it's more, how do you make it interactive and engaging and modern and value-led to attract people into your various funnels. And I think they also realized that there's a wide open swath of opportunity out there, right? They were having success in maybe this niche of a market, but opening up that that digital channel, those new acquisition strategies, demand gen plays, I think then they start to see market share grow and growth in sectors that they hadn't seen before. It's definitely going to save the salespeople time. I think once salespeople are on the end of those calls, that there is actual demand, they're not kicking and screaming and really over the top selling. I think they find that the work is probably a little bit more efficient. And so I think it's a good time for B2B for sure.
And I think you raise another very valid point, which is that even the B2B brands that had a marketing function in the past, they were driving, or they were KPI'd on driving leads, not demand. And there's a big difference between the two, because you can go out there and you can get cheap leads from lots of different sources, but unless they have shown intent to buy your product or your category of products or services, then that lead is very unlikely to convert. And because I think in the B2C, D2C space, the marketing side of the business is much more conversion orientated. And so therefore, they are much more focused on driving true, genuine demand that's going to convert within 30 days. And that's got its own issues that we won't talk about because it's B2C, D2C land. But on the B2B side, I'm seeing an evolution similar to what you described, which is, okay, if we have a marketing function, it better bloody drive genuine demand that has a high likelihood of converting, as opposed to driving a whole bunch of cheap MQLs that they're not an SQL, not a sales qualified lead, they're a marketing qualified lead. And because we're KPI'd wrong historically in the B2B space, we now have a whole bunch of cheap, crappy, low quality leads that are unlikely to convert without a heroic effort by sales. And that has also led to a situation where in the B2B space, sales has almost disdain for marketing in many respects, because the leads that they get driven are so rubbish that they're like, I might as well go out and get the leads myself, because at least I know that they have a high likelihood of converting if I've been selective in the accounts that I'm targeting. Right? But I think that's slowly shifting. And I think you're absolutely right that B2B marketers now realize, actually, no, we're not just going to drive leads. We're going to drive demand, or in other words, desire for our product or our services. And so understanding buyer psychology is now more important in B2B, like it already is in B2C, D2C. Would you say in general that's the direction that the market is headed?
Right, because just thinking about like data and that word leads for a second, there's so many companies that are 8-9-figure SaaS companies where you could buy that data, access it, build out your account-based marketing strategy, run automated LinkedIn function. There's so many clean ways to move that forward if you're just thinking pure sales enablement. And so when you zoom back and you think, okay, in today's modern marketing motions, just running, I think those whole terms like product-led, content-led, community-led, sometimes it sounds like a farce because it really is rarely just one channel. And so I think you do have to have this omni-channel approach, which does involve purchasing data, whether you're gathering that through form fills, whether you're running ungated content, whether that's you're getting on a Seamless or an Apollo, acquiring the data, whatever your strategy is to build that data enrichment process out, that's one piece of it. But I think looking at the way people discover new products and then go to the retailers and demand those products, it's totally different. And so the ways you get to those consumers, even though it's not the D2C play, those people are the end users for many of these products we're discussing, especially on the retail side. And so I think getting them to actually create the demand, go to the retailers, the buyers, etc., talk about the products, that's where we're starting to see, I think, changes. And I think that's the area where, because it's so new, that's where a lot of B2B companies struggle. They don't have anyone in-house who really speaks that language. They're not key on whitelisting ads. They don't understand UGC. They're not sure how to run influencer campaigns. People have been doing influencer campaigns for a long time in D2C. You go over to B2B, not even just e-com, right? It just take like B2B service industries, like they don't understand, or B2B SaaS companies. There's not a playbook for them to say, hey, we're going to identify the influencer. Here's our strategy. Here's how you're going to post the content. Here's how you're going to get paid. Here's how we measure a win. You see some of the stuff we're going through with some of the software companies, that project you and I are working on. It's challenging. There's extra layers. There's wrinkles. So I think that in the next 5 or less years will become a big mechanism where you're seeing creator-led companies being built right now. And you're seeing people that have already created the audience now have that ability to push products and almost build it from the ground up sometimes, it seems. But
couldn't agree more. And that leads really and segues really nicely into the discussion around Wholesale Gorilla. So you're effectively their fractional CMO. You're working with them and you're leading their marketing function. And that's how we got connected. But if we think about their tech for a moment, I think what is becoming abundantly clear is that even e-commerce platforms that have historically been B2C, D2C focused platforms such as Shopify, which is the ecosystem that Wholesale Gorilla plays in, even those platforms, there is more demand than ever before for B2B e-commerce capabilities in those platforms. And if they're not going to step up and do it themselves and deliver those functionalities themselves, and admittedly Shopify is dipping their toes in the water with a little bit of native functionality there now. But for a long time, they didn't do anything in the B2B space, and they relied almost exclusively on the app ecosystem to drive those B2B capabilities in the industry. So how did the guys over at Wholesale Gorilla, I guess, first of all, identify the gap? Second of all, identify that the Shopify ecosystem was worth diving into from a B2B perspective? And then third, how did they define their initial MVP of capability to go to market with, that they felt, okay, here's enough functionality to be ready to launch, but hey, we know that over time we're going to have to enhance and extend this, but we're ready to go. We're ready to go to market with this piece of functionality, and we think Shopify is ripe for this type of functionality.
Yeah, great question. Their story starts in 2017, and it's a classic entrepreneur journey. The founder, Matt, his wife had a Shopify store. Traditional B2B business, was selling wholesale to a variety of vendors. She was sourcing products from one part of the world, bringing them into the United States, reselling them, mostly like home good type products, and couldn't figure out how to make this easier. So she also wanted to grow her business simultaneously, and Shopify at that point was fairly newer to market, was certainly not as well known as it is today 5-6 years ago. And so had her store, wasn't really an out of the box solution. And Matt at that time looked at it and said, like, why? Like, he felt strongly that Shopify had solved a big problem for his wife. They collectively felt that the energy in that small business ownership, direct to consumer place was growing. You're seeing more people want to be their own entrepreneur, own their own business. Like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that wasn't as sexy as it is in the narrative now. He looked at that solution. He actually taught himself to code. So he went, took some training, cobbled together an initial set of skills, outsourced the parts he needed to outsource, built an MVP, and I believe within the first year of addressing the problem had launched the app into the ecosystem, effectively solved his wife's problem. And then from there, I believe it was a slow burn, right? It was sharing that in their immediate network, getting it listed in the app store. And then I believe just each year they've grown in revenue. I think at this stage, they've helped over 15,000 Shopify merchants with their B2B e-com solution. And to your point, Shopify has certainly added that functionality to the Shopify Plus stack. So if your business can afford the $2,000+ fee every month for Shopify, then that's a great solution. What we find is there's a wide swath of folks that don't require all of the customization and bells and whistles that come with Shopify Plus, and a $2,000 run cost is not their only technology consideration. So they have Shopify in addition to all these other pieces to the puzzle. So there needed to be something at that lower price tier. And if you look now, there's a variety of competitors at a lower price tier in that $9.99 to $99 a month range that solve that problem. And our goal at Wholesale Gorilla is to be the brand they remember. We've got a sea of competitors out there. There's some folks that do similar things, but we want to win on customer service, on brand, on story, on functionality, of course, on feature set. And so we're really excited about our work with them and helping them. We're launching a partner program. We're launching new acquisition channels. We're talking to B2B creators like yourself. We're ramping up podcast sponsorship. So we're really trying to flex that muscle. We went through a brand refresh at the early part of the year. So we're trying to get those assets out and tell that story about Matt and his founder story with his wife and her Shopify store and how they built a solution to solve a problem and now how they've helped thousands of merchants do the same.
And I love that you addressed there the fact that because there was this gap in the market, in that intervening time, if you just Google B2B or if you go into the Shopify App Store and you search B2B, you get 20 different apps, for example, that add varying different levels of B2B functionality, all the way from maybe just handling quoting, all the way to full suites that offer a gamut of modules and functionality and everything in between. Some of those apps are, as you said, $10 a month. Some of those are $500 a month. And so there's a huge variety. And so how are you finding it challenging to differentiate yourself in the market, or because you were one of the earliest movers, you already have a brand name, you already have some name recognition that you can lean into, or is it a constant battle of differentiation to try to say, hey, we are different, here's how we're different, here's why we're different, here's why you should consider us versus some of these other apps? Is that easier or harder given when they started in the ecosystem?
Yeah, and I think playing in an app ecosystem definitely adds a wrinkle to the whole challenge because you're given a fixed palette of ways you can position your brand to that bottom of the funnel, right? When they want to convert, they have to go to this one place to convert, and it's controlled in a way by Shopify. So that certainly creates its own set of boundaries. And I think what we've done a good job of is capturing demand in the app ecosystem. I do agree there's a sea of competitors. They all have a range of features. And what I always wonder is, how many of the business owners are so problem aware that they even know the features that they want in a product, right? They know they want to be able to sell online, but do they really need, or have they thought about custom registration and quick order forms and line sheet? Like, where is their level of knowledge in there? So how do you find that balance of like feature stack versus selling the benefit and the outcome, and again with that limited palette? So we're trying to expand the message beyond there and drive more demand and hopefully see that uptick in direct traffic through the app ecosystem continue to grow with those efforts. But I do think that what we also see is because many of our customers are on the smaller side or they're growing a business, where they often struggle is the general tech stack, growing on e-com. They're not familiar with SEO and acquisition and funnels and all these other things that you could bring your book of business with you. But if you're trying to grow your book of business using these e-com channels and new tools, then there's this whole other set of things that you need to be aware of and manage to be successful. And so we're trying to align with that. And our theory is that if we can be the brand that, for example, we're going to partner with retention.com, for example, and we're going to go through a process with Adam and his team and talk about how you can actually uncover lost revenue and build B2B flows using Klaviyo and really helping them understand those components. That will help the audience see us as founder who've identified a problem, cares about our success, is creating assets that help us get to those revenue goals, because if we hit those revenue goals, we can stay online, we can continue to invest in this. And so that's our theory that we're testing out this year through a variety of different content channels.
And that begs the question. Historically, I think a lot of apps in the Shopify App Store, they really didn't have to do too much marketing outside the App Store. They relied on the traffic coming to the App Store, maybe being one of less than 5 apps in their particular vertical or in their particular capability set. That would drive all the traffic, that would drive all the conversion. They would make sure that they had really good copy, maybe a great embedded video about the product, and they focused all their energy on that platform landing page or the app landing page within the App Store. And that's where their marketing efforts began and ended, because they didn't really need to do much else. Shopify was driving all the demand for their product. But what we're seeing now is that the best, most successful apps have their own website, they've got their own landing pages, they've got their own funnel, that then from that website or from those digital assets and those digital enablement tooling, they then will lead back to the App Store for people to then make the purchase and convert of that app and then get it installed into their Shopify store. Now, I noticed that as of today, Wholesale Gorilla still just has their Zendesk landing page. That's their homepage outside of the App Store. And have you started to think about, because I know you haven't been working with Wholesale Gorilla that long yet, and you're still at the beginning of the journey, but have you thought, hey, actually, we probably need to have a dedicated website with a dedicated proper landing page with a whole lot more information other than just a help desk onboarding information, and we need to create that as the hub of all knowledge, the font of all knowledge about Wholesale Gorilla, which then can lead back to the App Store for that download function. Have you started to think about what that brand presentation online outside the App Store needs to look like in this brave new world of apps needing to generate their own demand?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually do. We have a multi-page website with a blog that has features, price plan comparisons, founder story. We spent the first part of this year ramping that up. And the Zendesk help feature you mentioned, I think eventually we'll migrate that to our site for some SEO benefit. I think there's enough commonly asked mid-funnel questions that the owners are trying to solve that if we can capture some of that demand through organic traffic, we'll position ourselves in a good place, because like you said, it's important to diversify outside of that app ecosystem traffic. And it has become more competitive, right? So there are more folks in there. But yeah, we definitely see the value in those. And like what we're really excited about is our partner program. We launched it in July. In the first month, we had 30 folks sign up. We had 10 referrals come through in the very first 30 days. So we definitely feel like that validates that there are other people who see the value in that business. And yeah, Shopify is a great ecosystem. Love working with them. I think they're going to continue to evolve the product and solve a lot of problems for people. And I think being a part of that ecosystem and trying to differentiate through brand story, and some of the features are similar. So how do we make our customer service better? How do we make the onboarding better? How do we make the experience better? So we're looking at what are some gifts we can send folks? How do we really give them a white glove experience at our higher price point to make it easy so that they don't have to stress about the setup? How do we get them ramped up on the same day instead of multiple days now? Like, we're just trying to improve the process. Also why we fill the top of the funnel with more users.
And how do you guys think about product road mapping? So how does marketing help to inform and refine the product roadmap when you guys think about, okay, the next 6, 12, 18 months, here's what we want to do, here's what we want to add to the platform, here's how we can differentiate further. How are you creating feedback loops with either existing customers to make sure that you're adding things that they want to continue to adopt, to keep them stickier on the platform for longer without them needing to migrate to an entirely different e-commerce platform even? So basically you keep them in your ecosystem longer. How do you do that? And then second of all, how do you start generating a bit of a feedback loop from people who aren't yet customers who, okay, cool, we know that we could secure these type of customers, this demographic of customers, if we added these two pieces of functionality that we don't have today, combined with your existing knowledge of the market. Okay, we've got our existing roadmap, but hey, maybe this needs to be tweaked based on input from marketing, based on customer feedback, etc. How do you keep that loop very circular so that you're keeping your finger on the pulse of the market to make sure that your roadmap reflects what the market actually demands?
Yeah, it's a great question. And one of the things we've done this year is hire a very well-appointed, skilled background COO to help develop some systems. And we do, for example, this quarter have a weekly set of customer calls that we schedule out. We've considered things in the future like a Slack channel, some sort of community hub where that feedback loop could be a little more real time and continuous. And through our process of launching a partner program, we're also talking to Shopify dev agencies, Klaviyo partners, folks that are on the acquisition side who really work hand in hand with a variety of B2B folks who are launching their business, and trying to just hear from a lot of different folks on what is needed, what's fluff, what matters, right? Because at the end of the day, I think roadmaps are great. It's nice to have your plan, but you've stated if you're not listening to the customer, understanding some of that. One thing they requested was a line sheet, so that's been in the roadmap. One thing they talked about was we would really like an option to set up the store live that day. Right now we have to log in, do some things on the back end. Sometimes that takes a day or two. So we're trying to tighten that process up. So I think it's a constant flow of communication, and we're in the middle of a UI UX redesign that should launch later this year to help just clean up some of the process, and been a couple of years since that had been done. Yeah, there's a lot to it, and certainly not, I think most of it at a smaller stage company as a fractional marketing guy that's driven founder led product road mapping with the team. He's coming with his vision. He's seen this thing from the beginning to now. And so I think that's where he really gets excited, is continuing to evolve the product and to make it better and to hear the customers. And I know he's really involved with his customer support team. There's a multi-person team that's interacting with customers on a daily, weekly basis. They're getting a lot of real-time feedback. And so I think that all is aggregated into his vision.
Yeah, and I guess that's the beauty of having a technical founder of a technical business, right? It's sometimes we get founders who are non-technical, and then they have to try to go find a CTO, or they have to find a CIO or a CEO, or they have to find all these people that they surround themselves with so that they can start to even think about, how do I develop a product roadmap when I'm not a technical person myself? I haven't worked in the space before, but I'm a good business person. I'm a good entrepreneur. I recognize a gap in the market, and so I'm going to run at this gap, but my knowledge needs to evolve pretty rapidly, or I need to take people on that are subject matter experts to be able to develop this roadmap over time. But it feels most of the super successful tech companies that are out there are, not all, but most, seem to be led by very technical founders. And all the way from Elon Musk and Tesla, we look at Steve Jobs and Apple, and maybe he wasn't a total technician, but he was a designer with a design eye. And so therefore, the focus of their products wasn't necessarily technical from the beginning. It was the design and the design experience that created the differentiation for their brand. And so it feels like, in your case, having a technical founder whilst his wife was the business entrepreneur that helped to define the business need to begin with, that feels like almost like the perfect combination, where typically someone like that would have to go out and find those resources to be able to inform that roadmap, because he upskilled himself, became technical, became a developer, got that capability under his belt. Now it's easier for him to create a technical roadmap that meets the business objectives of the customer.
Yeah, I think that's true with so many things. It's hard to delegate something you don't understand. And even if you're not a technical founder, but you go hire one, do you really know the right questions to ask to elicit the response that's going to get you to where you need? Because obviously you've got some vision here, but if you're not, I see this so commonly with SEO, for example, with e-com owners. It's like they know they need it. They know they want to rank high, but they don't know any of the right questions to ask. And they get into these terrible relationships with agencies and signing 6-month contracts for $5,000 a month for a bunch of crappy blogs. And it's just, you got to understand where you are to envision it. Yeah, no, I think it's great to have the technical founder. And I certainly know that many of our early conversations before I came on board were about product inspiration. And he does feel strongly about the small business owner, and he's seen what just his wife and her community of folks has been able to do for themselves by launching on Shopify, taking a really simple idea and spreading it to a wide swath of people. And so I think it's powerful for him, and I think he's excited to play that role in it.
And do you think that I've seen the demand for B2B e-commerce explode during COVID? I know these guys started in 2017. That was well before COVID, obviously. They were obviously well down the product development roadmap by the time COVID hit. Did they find that COVID was just like a tank of rocket fuel for their business? Did their acquisition just go through the roof during the COVID period, as B2B businesses that maybe didn't have a strong digital play pre-COVID, all of a sudden their sales reps couldn't go out and visit customers. They couldn't go out and acquire new customers easily. They had to start doing everything via Zoom. They didn't even have an e-commerce channel at that stage. What did COVID do to this business in terms of B2B commerce demand? Was it like rocket fuel for their business?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I haven't looked at that specific time and specific growth numbers or revenue and tried to put a number to it. But I do know that it was a nice blip for them initially. And so I think what you certainly saw also is just more people starting their own thing. And I think that, coupled with some of this demand you're talking about, definitely helped catapult them to where they are today. They've had significant growth every year. And I think, but I'm not sure 100% on the growth numbers.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what do you think, has the business thought about, okay, we're aligned with the Shopify ecosystem and that's awesome, but maybe we need to look at, hey, do we build an app for BigCommerce? Hey, do we build an app for WooCommerce? Because WooCommerce doesn't do B2B well out of the box. Do we start building more of an end-to-end e-commerce platform in our own right that, hey, if somebody doesn't want to use Shopify, we provide more of an end-to-end cart system in addition to the B2B functionality? Do we partner with some of these smaller e-commerce platforms that are SaaS? They're just finding their footing, but they're on a steady growth trajectory, or maybe it's Wix, maybe it's Weebly, whatever it might be. Maybe it's Squarespace, because Squarespace doesn't really do B2B. Have they thought about growth opportunities outside the Shopify ecosystem and what that might look like, since they already have this prowess of building plugins for SaaS platforms? Is that a growth opportunity that you guys are exploring, or do you feel like you haven't maximized all the growth opportunity within the Shopify ecosystem? Hey, let's really double down on that. Let's absolutely tap that out before we start looking at all these other opportunities. Because I find that a lot of these SaaS platform vendors and app vendors, they sometimes end up spreading themselves too thin, and all of a sudden it becomes hard to execute on any of these channels because they're trying to do them all, and they end up being a jack of all trades and master of none.
Yeah, great question. I certainly think there's continued conversation around optimizing Shopify. We think that it still has a lot of great growth ahead of it. There have been conversations, to the point you made at the earlier part of your question was, are there other platforms that also struggle with the solution for B2B? And if we're going to invest in building a brand and really want to be Wholesale Gorilla, we want to be the king of that conversation. And if we can be the king of that B2B e-com conversation, to your point, it does open a lot of other doors. Payment solutions, web hosting solutions, web CMS systems. You look at I think Shopify becomes a bloated tech stack sometimes. There's so many little pieces that they have to have. You got to have your review widget. You got to have your email widget, your B2B widget, your payment widget. It just goes on. And so I think you're going to see people consolidate in some form or fashion. And I think that's one of the negative feedback, because we work with D2C brands as well. So I see it on the user side, where they're like, God, I got 10 apps. And
I got 20 apps, minimum of 20 apps on most of the projects I work on Shopify.
Yeah. So where does that balance out? And I think it's hard to predict how trends and large groups of people are going to behave in the future. So I don't really try. But I do know that kind of aligning with both realities is something that is definitely interesting. And at the end of the day, if the mission is to help small business owners, then there could be a lot of other ways to do that through the technology and things we can create.
Makes sense, yeah. And look, I think the Shopify, for all the things that people love to complain about Shopify, and look, is Shopify perfect for every single merchant out there? No, it's not. That's why other platforms exist. If Shopify was perfect for everyone, they'd be the only platform game in town. But for all of its faults, look, there's over 2 million sites on the platform and growing daily. It has the lion's share of B2C, D2C merchants out there, mid-market and above. They've done really well. They've got pause now for omni-channel, and they've got issues with that, but it meets the needs of a big percentage of the market. So they've done a lot of things right. They've done more right than they've done wrong. Let's put it that way. But it can't be all things to all people. How do you guys think about I guess the one thing that Shopify has done right to keep the ecosystem happy is to reduce that rev share cost below $1 million a year in revenue. And so I think Shopify's tried to do right by the ecosystem as much as they can to keep the ecosystem happy. There's complaints from some corners of the ecosystem that Shopify knows what are the top apps installed. They know which apps get uninstalled and when. They know how long an app stays installed and in active use. They've got all this data because they collect it all through their platform. And they have slowly, over the last, I would say, in particular, the last 24 months, they've slowly seemed to start cherry picking some of that top app-based functionality and roll it out into their own platform. And we think about the latest editions release where they've talked about their native bundles functionality, their native subscription functionality, a couple of enhancements, although minor, to B2B functionality. And they slowly seem to be working their way through the app ecosystem and cherry picking the most demanded stuff and saying, look, if we can bring that into the native platform, then it's going to keep people on our platform longer instead of jumping ship to another platform. But on the flip side of that coin, it has the perverse effect of potentially harming some of the app vendors that are also out there in the market providing those apps today. So do you think that there is an element of risk of the Shopify app ecosystem where you say, yep, lots of demand, growing platform, amazing app ecosystem, amazing commercials around it, but there is a risk that over time Shopify adds sufficient B2B functionality to where maybe we're not as in demand anymore on the platform? Is there that? Are you always trying to weigh up the risk versus reward of being inside that ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's true with any big technology. Think about you and I, like we both spend a lot of energy and time building LinkedIn platforms. All of a sudden, is there a risk to that? Yeah, because they could delete your stuff because they don't like all your posts about Mexico. They could, who knows, right? So I think with any technology business that relies on another provider that they don't control, there is some level of inherent risk, right? Me personally, I feel like, you know what, they just announced some email functions last week, right? Where you could basically go in and use AI to, so is it out of the question that something like what you propose happens? I don't think it's out of the question, right? They certainly have proven me wrong in the ways they've progressed their product roadmap and adjusted things. But I think all you can control is creating the best experience for your customers and really trying to be helpful and valuable. And if pivots needed to be made or adjustments need to be made, then certainly is not the first time it's happened in technology. Definitely interesting, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say, okay, in the next 6 to 18 months, these are the 1, 2, or 3 top pieces of additional functionality that we're going to be adding to the platform because we know it's in demand. We've already got this feedback from the market. And then obviously that translates into more marketing opportunities for you as the CMO of the business. Obviously, if you know what the roadmap looks like and what the top priorities are for your customers, then you can really go hammer and tongs at marketing that functionality being on the roadmap and saying, hey, move to us now because in 3 months' time or 6 months' time, we're going to have this awesome new thing. And if you get onboarded in the platform now, you're just going to benefit from this ongoing enhancement of the platform. Is there something that's super high on the radar that your customers are asking for that you're going to add soon?
Yeah, so we're in the midst of a longer process wrapping up the UI UX design, and we've initiated a new round of customer interview process to help refine updated features. We certainly have some in mind. One of the functionalities that was requested was line sheet ordering, get everything streamlined, reduce the screens, reduce the clicks. Another thing was a different payment integration option, so that was mentioned. But through our process of launching the affiliate program and having these conversations with customers, we really hope to refine that and come up with something that, and maybe we find that it's not necessarily new features per se, but maybe it's support, maybe it's development, maybe it's the customization of the page, maybe it's not matching the way, so maybe it's more aesthetic things. But we'll go through our process and work with customers to uncover that. And then I think by the end of Q3, the goal is to update that roadmap based on some new insights with customers and get that out. But again, I think there is a level of wait and see and hoping that we continue to create things that customers are interested in.
And I'm guessing API connectivity and making sure, particularly in the B2B world, because most B2B merchants will be running an ERP of some kind on their back end. And oftentimes that ERP is their single source of truth. In D2C world, oftentimes it's maybe a PIM system in combination with an ERP. PIMs are not as common yet in the B2B world. So ERP is still the beating heart of most of these B2B businesses if they're mid-size or larger. And so I'm guessing that integration capabilities in the platform are a really key focus for you guys.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many different integration touch points and different things we've helped set up. And so I know the ERP systems are huge. And I think that it's part of the challenge with this is the B2B space is so unique. Everyone's got their own setup and way. And so I know some of that's been sometimes you go down a rabbit hole with one solution, but realize you're missing the opportunity over here. And so it's really with a small team, with a focus group, how do you really maximize the highest ROI for everybody, but also be willing to customize for customers as needed.
Love it. Love it. Listen, May, I have really enjoyed our conversation about not only Wholesale Gorilla and obviously your work with them as a CMO, but how you're seeing the B2B market evolve and how particularly you're seeing marketing for B2B, not only B2B SaaS brands, but also physical product brands, B2B retailers. There's been a lot of change in this space in a very short period of time. And I think your insights from the seat of the pants view of not only from the Wholesale Gorilla perspective, but also from a B2B marketing perspective, I think this is going to be super, super valuable for lots of my audience out there. And I hope that they take a lot from this. We're now coming to the end of our time together. And this is the time when I get to flip the script and hand the microphone over to you and let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal, it can be professional, whatever you like. So for Brandon Bobart from Wholesale Gorilla, what's your question for me today?
Yeah, man. Since we started the call with the talk about Mexico, I just asked what drove you to want to make the move to Mexico? What was the impetus, the catalyst, the driving force behind that? I think that's what I'll ask.
Yeah, look, fantastic question. I think there were a lot of catalysts. Many people may not know, but during COVID, New Zealand was one of the most locked down countries in the world. My wife and I are big travelers. We didn't travel for over 3 years because it was going to be so hard to get back into New Zealand if we did leave the country. And the lockdown restrictions in New Zealand were pretty intense, and they lasted for a really long time. And I think outside of New Zealand, Melbourne or Victoria, Australia was the only other place in the world that got locked down for as long as New Zealand did. And I think that really put a shot over our bow that this could happen again. And people are saying that there's likely to be another world pandemic at some stage. And New Zealand's likely to go down a similar path again of locking down the whole country. And we didn't want to put ourselves in the vulnerable position of being stuck in New Zealand for 3 years at a stretch. So for us, that was definitely one of the big parts of it I think they've got a saying for it now, revenge travel, that a lot of people that felt like they were locked down for a long time during COVID and all over the world, now they're traveling more than ever before because they're trying to make up for lost time. I think that's part of it. I think the other thing is cost of living. Cost of living in New Zealand is extremely high. Inflation rate is still very high. Remote, down in the bottom of the world, difficult to travel to other parts of the world. In the digital and e-commerce space, North America is really where it's at. United States and UK in particular, in terms of Northern Hemisphere countries, are the top countries in the world from an e-commerce perspective. And being able to attend events in the United States, I wasn't able to attend events for several years. And even when I was able to attend events, I didn't attend that many because traveling from New Zealand to the United States just for a conference, pretty expensive proposition, and wanted to be closer to the epicenter of commerce, really. And it's super cheap and easy for me to fly from Mexico to the United States. I'm going to Retail Fest in San Diego in October, and then I'm doing another B2B conference in Florida. And just at the end of this year, I'm doing like 3 or 4 conferences, and then next year I've already got about 5 or 6 conferences lined up. So that played a part. There's lots of catalysts, but I think cost of living, ability to access the United States market, being closer to that market, better weather, better travel ability. I think all those things really were pretty important to us. And Mexico is, a lot of people don't know this, but Mexico is one of the freest countries in the world. I'm a United States citizen as well, dual citizen, United States, New Zealand. And lots of Americans think America's the freest country in the world kind of thing. But I think they'd be surprised if they spent much time in Mexico. The level of freedom here is pretty intense. There's not a lot of rules or laws that govern it feels like it's very regulation light here in Mexico, even from a road law perspective and everything else. It's just just a really ultra high level of personal freedom here, mixed with an ultra high level of personal responsibility, because there's not as many, I guess, social safety nets. And as a result of that, you have to take more personal responsibility for your life than you would in places like the United States or New Zealand. So it is a bit of a double-edged sword. But if you like that, if you like the fact, high level of freedom, high level of personal responsibility, Mexico's a pretty cool place to be if you like that and you appreciate that way of living. We do like that aspect here. And one example is during COVID. They never closed their borders. It's one of the only countries in the world that never shut their borders. They never had jab mandates. They never required a negative COVID test to visit here during COVID. And as a result of that, their economy, most economies around the world, slid down the GDP rankings during COVID. Mexico actually went up the GDP rankings. Their economy absolutely boomed here with the nearshoring that happened en masse from China back to, there's a lot of American companies that did the bulk of their manufacturing in China pre-COVID, and they moved a lot of their manufacturing to Mexico because it's just across the border, and logistics is cheaper, it's faster, it's easier, lots of natural resources available here in Mexico. It's got a lot. The country's got a lot going for it. It's a young, dynamic. The working age population is very young here. I think it's about, on average, 10 years younger than the United States, and I think about 13 or 14 years younger than New Zealand. So super young, dynamic population, fast-growing economy, fast-growing currency, just lots of cool things going for it. So we thought we'd come and check it out, and we've enjoyed it so far.
Yeah. No, I could definitely see how that makes sense, and being closer to North America. And I'd love to go to New Zealand, but I've never gone because it's so damn far away.
Yeah, it's like a 14-hour flight from LA, so it's not a short little jaunt across the Pacific there.
Nah, I totally get it, man. I'm happy you've landed there. Thank you for having me on the show. I appreciate it. And looking forward to continuing collaborations, my friend.
Love it. And if people want to get a hold of you and have a conversation with you, best place to find you, LinkedIn. I'm guessing that from a Wholesale Gorilla perspective, just go to the Shopify App Store, search for Wholesale Gorilla. They can find it there. I'll put the links in the show notes. But if people want to get a hold of you, they want to chat with you a bit more, either about Wholesale Gorilla or about marketing, digital marketing for B2B, etc., best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah, just LinkedIn is great. You can send me a DM there. I've got my Calendly on my LinkedIn profile. So if you want to book a time to chat marketing, chat growth solutions, chat how you can improve your marketing business, if you're spending a lot of time on freelancers or Fiverr and you feel like your head's spinning and you need a better solution, would love to chat about it and see how we can help things out. But yeah, it's going to be LinkedIn. It's /Brandon Bobart, and you can find me there.
Brandon, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to chatting with you again soon, my friend. Catch ya.
Cheers, buddy. All right, bye.
If you're into B2B commerce and you would like to be a guest on B2B Commerce Corner, simply go to ecommerceedge.net, click on more info, then click on be a guest and fill out your details, and we will get back to you straight away.